Hi there everybody, and thank you to Stuart and the team for inviting me to speak to you today. I want to talk to you about disruption and what we can do to prepare for even more disruption coming our way so that it doesn't wipe us out and stress us out too much. We know that disruption is part of our world, and we don't need anybody to come along and tell us that. We've lived through 2.5 years of massive COVID disruption. But there are at least two reasons why I think that disruption needs to become part of our language, part of our approach to work and life for the next few years, maybe for the rest of our lives. The first is that as much as COVID was a disruptor itself, COVID, I'm sure, has accelerated other disruptors. We'll look back in a few years' time and realize that was actually the bigger issue, especially digital transformation that is now moving faster than it was even 2.5 years ago. The second thing is that there is more disruption coming. And there are lots of things that can and will disrupt our world, from geopolitics to climate change. And, well, I don't have to tell you at Altron that disruption is still part of our reality, isn't it? So what must we do about it? Well, ideally, we'd love to be able to predict the future, to be able to see what's going to happen next. Again, probably don't have to tell you at Altron about that. But we can't. We can't predict what will happen. What we can do, though, is prepare ourselves for whatever will happen. And I love this quote from Mark Mullen, CEO of Atom. It's a fintech company based out of the UK. Actually, I think about to list on the New York Stock Exchange. I agree with him completely. It's more important to build adaptability into our system than it is for us to try and predict what will happen. To put it another way, why waste a great crisis, right? I've got a lot of clients who have felt the crisis of the COVID and lockdown and now supply chain issues and inflation and in South Africa there's even more than that with politics and economics and lots of reasons to say there's a crisis. And they kind of try and grit their teeth through the crisis, try and get through the crisis and then get back to normal as quickly as possible, ignoring the fact that there is a massive opportunity during a time of crisis for us to learn skills, for us to change our approach so that we can become more resilient, more responsive to change, more adaptive, more agile. And I think that this is the invitation that the next few years give to us. We are going to live in constant disruption. Let's take the opportunity as soon as we can to build a skill set, a mindset, a toolkit, whatever language you'd prefer to use, that will help us to engage with whatever is coming our way. And for me, the language of that toolkit is the language of being anti-fragile. Now, I'm borrowing this from a fantastic author. Well, let me say, I love his ideas. I don't love his writing. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he's got a really dense writing style, but his insights are fantastic. He's the author of the book, The Black Swan. And I'm sure you know that language of big surprising events that come our way that we didn't expect. And one of his other books is called Antifragile. And he's got a great point. He says we don't have this word in the English language. We know what it means for something to be fragile, right? When you hit it, it breaks. We know what something is like when it is robust, or I prefer the word resilient, right? When you hit it, it doesn't break. But we don't have a word for something that gets stronger when you hit it, that gets stronger under stress and disruption. For those of you who prefer graphs, here's how Taleb puts it. If this is the strength of your system, And we've now got a situation where we put stress on the system. You've got this, what I've called the hit, right? It's a breaking point, a big stress that comes into the system. Let's use disruption there. It's a disruptor that comes in. In a fragile system, things break and you never recover, right? You've lost your strength. In a resilient or robust system, yeah, there's a hit, right? And you take the punch and then you go back to how things were. You're robust, you're resilient. What he's arguing is that there are systems where, yeah, you might take a little hit, but you recover, and you recover to better than you were. The subtitle of his book is Things That Gain from Disorder, things that get better after they're broken, disrupted, beaten, and battered. Now, you might be asking, what on earth? Are there things like that? It doesn't feel as if we live in a world that is like that, but there are. In fact, there are a lot more things that are like this than you can imagine. Your muscles are a really great example. Oof, look at this guy. But when you go to the gym, right, and you're stressing your muscles so that they hurt, the actual hurt in your muscles is because you've literally torn your muscles. You've literally broken your muscles. And what happens is your muscles then recover. That's why it's important in athletics and physical activity to have recovery time. Your muscles recover, but the recovery, they grow back over those little tears, and they grow back stronger. So that next time you go to the gym, you can pick up something even bigger. You do it in small little pieces. You can't just do it once and then it's finished. But your muscles are a good example. Maybe a more recent example that more of us can relate to, I'm not really a gym person, as you can probably see, is vaccines, right? A vaccine works, and a lot of medicines work this way, by putting a little bit of the disease into your body, and then your body actually does its anti-fragile thing and develops antibodies, so that next time the disease comes, or when the disease comes properly, your body says, oh, I know this, I'm ready for you. In fact, most living organisms are anti-fragile. It's the way the world works, it's the way evolution works, it's the way things grow. Biologists discovered this when they tried to grow trees inside laboratory environments. When the tree gets to a certain height, about 2.5 meters, it actually falls over. It's not strong at all. And they took a little while to work this out until they realized what happens when a tree is outside. If a big storm comes through, or a massive wind blows against that tree, from as small as it is, as it's growing, it actually cracks and breaks the trunk of the tree just a little bit. You might even hear that on a windy night. And as long as it doesn't break it completely, that would be a problem, right? But as long as it sort of just cracks it a little bit, the tree grows back stronger. And that's what gives it not just resilience, but a living organism being anti-fragile. There are business examples as well. Maybe the best example in the business world is the airline industry. If something goes wrong and an airplane crashes, it's a disaster for that particular plane. But what happens immediately is that people are sent out to go and recover the so-called black box. It's actually bright orange in most airplanes. And they recover the data recorder. They find out what went wrong, right? And they then let the rest of the industry know. And immediately all of the other planes in the industry upgrade. And if they don't upgrade, they get grounded until they are safe to fly again. So one issue, one break, one hit in the system means that the system itself immediately jumps to be better off, safer, and there are lots of other examples. The business language of this is that when an individual business in an industry or a sector fails, the sector itself well, at least has the potential to adapt quickly. Now, the question, of course, is how do you make sure that you are not the fragile one, that you are not the one that actually breaks in the system? And a lot of businesses then focus on making sure that they are not fragile. But we've got to do better than that. We've actually got to focus on becoming anti-fragile. Now, maybe this is going a little bit too far, where you actually invite disruption and you say, please mishandle us. But I think you get the idea of what I'm saying in terms of this concept of being and becoming anti-fragile. Okay. If that sounds like something we want to do, the question is, well, how do we do it? And that's what the rest of my session is about. Now, it isn't about blinding ourselves to the realities of the world around us. So it's not just about pretending that we're not being disrupted. It's not just about pretending that there isn't stress and strain in the system. That's obviously not, that's too simplistic. So what is it then? I'd like to suggest to you just 7 things. I mean, there's a lot more things that you can do. I would recommend I'd recommend summaries of Taleb's book. I'd recommend you look at this concept a little bit more, get into some of the detail. But to get you going, here are 7 things that you can do. Literally back at the office later today, you can start with all 7 of these and see where it gets you. The first of these is a psychological concept, and I'm sure you've heard of this before, but it's an absolutely essential place to start. I first heard it from Stephen Covey when he talked about it in his 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, one of the best-selling books of all time, still worth reading, by the way. And he talked about 3 areas of control that we have, and he called it sort of the locus of control. So the location of control. There are things that you can control. Then there are things that you can't control, but you can influence them. And then there are things that you have no control over, no influence over, but they do concern you. They're in your world and they affect you, but there's nothing you can do about them. And then, of course, there's a whole lot of stuff that's just of no concern to you at all. So don't worry about that stuff at all. And what Stephen Covey was encouraging people to do, and he sees this as one of the most important habits of highly effective people, is that our main focus should be on the things that we can control. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? And it's a whole lot easier to say this than it is to actually do. And those of you who are prone to anxiety, it's not as simple as just saying to you, don't worry about it, right? So I realize, again, there's probably quite a lot of work for you to do here, and there's some great articles that you can go and read if you know this language. Look for issues of locus of control, influence, and concern. But the most useful thing that you can do is to actually, maybe on a blank piece of paper, draw 3 columns. Take all of the things that are in your head, the things that you're worrying about, whether they're at the office or whether they're personal or at home, and try and allocate them to one of these columns. Is it something you have control over? Is it something that you don't have control over, but you might be able to influence the people who do have control? Or is it just something that, well, it concerns you? You can't just ignore it. You're not just going to forget that it exists, but there's nothing you can do about it. Literally just seeing that laid out on a piece of paper can really help you to recognize where you should be putting emotional energy and where you should be putting actual energy. Where should you be putting actual energy? As much as possible, spend most of your time on the things you have control over. And we'll come back to the issue of influence just a little bit later. Now, this flows into the second thing that I want to give you, which is admitting that you don't know. This might be more important for you, those of you who are leaders, for those of you who are parents back at home. We're not very good at human beings of saying, I don't know. And the higher up you are in whatever hierarchies you're in, the more likely it is you think that the expectation is that you've got an answer for every question. Now, I'm not saying that you should just act clueless and that you should be happy to not have any answers. And, that is the way that you overcome fragility. But what anti-fragility says is that a lot of disruption comes because systems are changing, because things are happening that have never happened before, or are happening in ways that have never happened before. And what we need to do is we need to acknowledge to ourselves that we haven't been here before. We haven't seen these things before. Our problem is that we have a lot of experience, a lot of expertise. We rely on our brain power and our education. And rightly so. This is what got you your job. This is the requirement of your job, is to be good at what you do. But there's a danger in this. I call these limiting orthodoxies. If I'm a visual learner, you might have realized that already, and maybe this picture will help you. You know the blinkers that they put on a racehorse, right? They put these blinkers next to their eyes. It's to help the racehorse to focus on the lane it's supposed to be running in. It's not to blind the horse, but it's to take away distraction so that the horse says, there's my lane, I'm going to stick to my lane, I'm going to run as fast as I can, and nothing will distract me. Our experience, our expertise, the things that we know, the way things are done around here that we are comfortable with, that we are familiar with, those become blinkers for us. They help us to do our job. But when disruption is happening, when things are changing around us, they become limiting orthodoxies. And so the third thing that we have to do is, if we are prepared to say, you know what, I haven't experienced this before, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. Not in a way which says I'm clueless, but in a way which says, let's work on this together. How should we engage and respond with this together? What are the good questions for us to be asking right now? That's a great leadership response when we feel that we're in a situation where we don't have a locus of control. And we're able to say, let's find the answer together by asking good questions together. What are the best questions we should be asking right now? Hot tip for you. What are the best questions we should be asking right now? And that leads into the third thing I want to suggest needs to be part of your anti-fragile toolkit. And that is your ability and desire to rethink and unlearn. In other words, to not just say it needs to keep going the way it's always been, or I like the familiar. Obviously we do. It's easier to live in a world that's not changing. But that's not the world we live in. And what we need to do is we need to say to ourselves, there are going to be things that will be different. What do I need to rethink and unlearn? Now, to be honest, I've got a whole course on rethinking and unlearning, and it goes to cognitive bias and all sorts of things like that. So we're not going to get into detail today, but that's enough of a question for you. What do we need to rethink and unlearn? Let me give you a real life example here. A lot of this might just feel like I'm giving you tools, but not showing you how they're used. One of my favorite companies to watch at the moment, I think they're doing amazing things around rethinking and unlearning, around innovation and adaptability. It's the Chinese appliance company called Haier, very similar to Samsung and other companies like that, if you haven't heard of them before. And when a new CEO came in a few years ago, this CEO said, we are going to do much better as a business at rethinking, unlearning, and asking great questions. And he started to look around the company to say, where could we apply this thinking? Where could we apply this rethinking and unlearning question? And almost immediately a great example emerged. Haier had just produced a brand new model of a washing machine. And they had sent it out into the market. They had got great feedback. And so they'd been pumping out millions of these units into the Chinese market. But suddenly they started to get complaints. People were saying, my washing machine is just breaking. It's not lasting long. And they were very surprised. The engineers at Haier said, this is the best washing machine we've ever made. What's going on? So they sent people out into the marketplace to go and find out, interview people who were using Haier washing machines. And they discovered, especially in rural areas across China, maybe places that hadn't had washing machines before, but now Haier was bringing washing machines to them, that the people who were complaining that their washing machines were broken were actually farmers who were saying, my washing machine won't work after I used it to rinse the potatoes or the carrots this morning. They were literally putting vegetables into the washing machine to wash them. Imagine the frustration back at head office. Now, how do you solve this, right? Well, one of the ways of solving this is to say, put stickers on the washing machine to say clothes only. Put the instruction manual in bigger writing. Put a big warning label on the front. Put TV adverts up to say to people, washing machines are for clothes only. That would be a way in which most of us would respond, right? Washing machines are for washing clothes. Please use the device well. But of course, you know that there's going to be a twist to the story here, because the CEO said, no, what if we decide to approach this disruption, right? This unexpected reality in our industry. What if we approach it with a questioning mindset? Is there another way to look at this? If we were to think in what if possibilities rather than trying to find the easy road into the future, what if we took some of these pathways that took us into what if, why not, what else type of conversations, asking different and better questions. So what did they do? Well, they built a washing machine that was capable of taking clothes and potatoes, and they can't keep up with the demand. For this, it's been one of their most successful product lines of all time. But there's not a single person at Haier who would have sat down and said, we need to build a potato washing machine. Now, this leads to the fourth thing, which I hope flows. I hope you can see the flow of my thought here, that we need to be experimenting more. I've kind of put this halfway through the 7 things that I want to show you, because if we're thinking of a mountain that we're climbing and then going down the other side in a few minutes, this is sort of the top of it. I think this is the most important thing I'm telling you today, that we need to build a culture of experimentation where we have experiments that we try, we fail or succeed at them, we share what happened, we learn from it, we repeat again. Now, some of you are getting a little bit worried, and Stuart and others might be going, Graeme, just slow down a little bit. You know, we don't want everybody to burn the place down. And when I get that sort of response from people, it's because they've got a different picture of experimentation in their heads than I do. They're thinking big business projects that will cost millions of rands, that'll take months and years to do, and if they go wrong, it goes badly wrong. Those are not the experiments I have in mind. Those are business projects. They need due diligence. Do them properly. Maybe a better word to experiment is just question. Go back to what I've just been saying. Or maybe what we need to do is just give people permission to ask questions. So it's not a major experiment. In fact, you know, a lot of people say think big. I actually say the opposite. Think small, right? I don't want you to have 3 big experiments between now and the end of the year. I'd like you to have 30 experiments between now and the end of the year. And yes, that would mean about 1 a week. Or more accurately, I think every single person at Altron should have an active experiment on the go at all times. thousands of experiments going. And I think if you are the leader of a team, part of your leadership responsibility should be to know what experiments each of your team members are trying, keep up with them, get them to give you feedback. So if somebody comes to you and says, I'd like to try something, you say, how do we minimize the risk of this experiment? Let's break it up into small bits that don't need budget approval, aren't going to break anything if they go wrong. Now let's try them. It's just a question, let's give it a go. You can't really fail at this point, because if it doesn't work, you just say, okay, fine, try something else. Share what happens, learn from it, repeat, repeat, repeat. In other words, I want you to think of building a culture of trying things out. And what a remarkable moment in history for us to do this. I've been doing this kind of work for 20 years, and up until 2020, up until the beginning of 2020, my favorite example at this point was to talk about working from home. And I would show some examples of companies that had been experimenting with people working from home, and I'd encourage people like you at Altron to say, well, why don't you let people work from home, see what happens? And I would be told, no, Graeme, no, it's never going to work, it's not going to work. And I'd say, you can't say that until you've tried it, right? So let's minimize the experiment, send a few people home who've got the right personality and the right job profile. Let's see what happens. And almost everybody who was brave enough to give it a go discovered that actually it was brilliant and it worked really well. Now, of course, COVID has ruined that example forever, because we now know that it can work. It might not be everybody's first choice and best, first prize, but it can work. But now we are at a moment in time where instead of going back to the way things used to be, instead of trying desperately to get back to life before COVID and life before lockdown, we've got the opportunity to experiment with all sorts of ways in which we can improve the future of work. And that's the way we should be having conversations about virtual meetings and hybrid teams and the office. The office isn't a destination, it's a tool. So if you need to all get together in the same place, then use the tool, the office, right? But it's not a destination that you just have to default to because it exists. Use it as a tool if you need it. Okay. Does it make sense so far? We focus on the things that we know that we can control, and we admit what we don't know and ask great questions to unlock new learning. Going as far as saying that we need to unlearn things that we thought we knew and understood because things are changing so much. And that in that process, we're not going to be able to think ourselves into the future. We're going to have to experiment more. Now, if those are 4 things that you can sort of do on your own, yes, it's great to do them with a team, but you don't really need the team's permission to do some of these. The last 3 things, very quickly, are 3 things that definitely require you to work together as a team. And if you're a leader, this is where you can step in and put some leadership into becoming anti-fragile. So the 5th thing that we need to do is we need to really focus on putting autonomy into the system. People like to talk about flexibility, and I've just talked about a hybrid world, and in your mind you've probably got thoughts around how much flexibility do we need to give and so on. I think there's great experiments to do there. But actually I'm going to push you further, because when people say they want flexibility, I agree with Adam Grant. He's a professor of psychology that focuses on the psychology of work at Wharton University. He's written a brilliant book that will really help you with some of the stuff I'm talking about, called Think Again. This one I do highly recommend you read cover to cover. In fact, I think it should be compulsory. And he argues, and I agree with him completely, that the flexibility that people want is not remote working and hybrid working. And in fact, not everybody can be remote, and not everybody can be as flexible as other people can be. But what people really want is autonomy. They want to be able to manage their own time. They don't want to be micromanaged and have their boss breathing over their shoulder. They want, let me give you 3 words. They want independence and agency, which leads to and flows from probably the biggest word in the workplace, trust. And many of us are working in environments where that trust has disappeared. And we've got bosses on our back trying to force us to prove that we're working, not trusting that we're working well from home. We've got to get trust in the system. So autonomy is trusting people, choosing to trust people. Now, you don't just blindly trust somebody. People have got to earn that trust. People have got to prove that they can work autonomously. And so you might want to ease into this. Remember, if the wind blows too hard, it will blow the tree over and the tree is broken. But if you slowly cracking and refreshing that tree, it grows really strong. Can you see how anti-fragile thinking comes into this? Starbucks is a good example of doing this. When Starbucks see that a store is performing well, so Starbucks are very clear about their processes, their systems, how things need to be done. And the first task of a Starbucks store is to do what they were trained and taught to do. But once they've demonstrated that they are doing that and they're getting the results, Starbucks then comes to them and they said, would you like to have a little autonomy? The people who work at Starbucks are probably coffee, they're passionate about their coffee. And so it's really fun for them. They really enjoy it when they are allowed to experiment a little bit. They can put their own items up for sale. They can play around a little bit. And you know what happens? I'm sure you do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be telling the story, right? The stores that are doing well and earn the right to have a little bit of autonomy, and if we want to use other words, innovation, freedom, autonomy, those stores just get even better, and they get better and better. So we get mastery first, then you can go to autonomy. And what we're looking for here is we're looking to give control to people as much as possible. These murmurations of birds are remarkable, aren't they? Fish do the same thing. But think about it. Who's in charge? Who's saying, turn left now, everybody. Now we're going down. Now we're going up. Where's the memo from the leader? Natural systems very often don't have leaders. Let's put business language in here. What we need is to distribute decision making. We need to put decision making as close to the front line of our business as possible. Or to put it another way, you need to put the authority where the decision and information actually is. Where the information is and the decision needs to be made, the authority should be there as much as possible. Now, self-organizing teams might be a step too far, where we don't need supervisors and managers and so on, but I put it in there anyway just to stretch some of you just a little bit. What you can and should be doing to build anti-fragility in your system is push decision making into your team as far as possible. Simple way to do this. When somebody in your team comes to you to ask permission to do something, refuse to give them permission. Not in the sense of stopping them doing it, but in the sense of saying to them, this is not my decision to make. You might know what the answer is. You might know whether they should or shouldn't do the thing they're asking you about. But you know it's their decision to make. So don't give them an answer. Maybe give them a question, right? You see how this all fits together? Maybe give them a question where you say to them, what do you intend to do? And what do you think the results of that will be? And what do you think we should be worried about with this decision that you're making? Yes, it takes longer to do it this way, but you're building an anti-fragile system which you'll be grateful for when the next disruption hits. Now that flows into the 6th thing that we need to do to become anti-fragile. And that is that we can't be running at full pace all the time. We can't be working at 110% of our capacity. We can't have filled every moment of every day. We've got to have excess capacity in the system. Now here I might be speaking to Stuart and the senior team, because very often in organizations, the language is about removing excess capacity, cutting off the fat, getting rid of that excess. Except that sometimes when you cut out fat, you can cut out muscle at the same time. And sure, you're now lean and mean, and maybe the shareholders are happy as long as everything's working fine. But when it starts raining, when a disruption comes, when you have a hit, well, then you need that excess capacity to be able to handle things. This is probably my favorite slide to show you today. What we think is going to make us more valuable to Altron is more work. Another hour of working, another meeting attended, another 5 emails responded to, another 7 messages replied to. What's actually going to make you more valuable to Altron is what athletes would talk about: peak performance. Most of us have been productive for the last 2 years. In fact, maybe more productive than we imagined we could be. But we are exhausted. And part of our exhaustion is flowing into stress and anxiety. And part of that is flowing into bad habits at the office, and maybe even bad attitudes. And a lot of our problems in the office could be solved if some of us just had a good night's sleep. And I'm not joking about this. We need to be thinking about our work as if we were athletes. Think of peak performance. Now, apologies for those of you who may be not sports fans or rugby fans. Let me use a rugby analogy for those who know what I'm talking about. Rassie Erasmus has changed the way that rugby will be played forever, and the Springboks have got the benefit. We became world champions, and one of the major reasons is that Rassie worked out that the bigger guys on a rugby team can only really give their all for about 60 minutes. And rugby is a longer game than that, right? Rugby is an 80-minute game. So what did he do? He said, well, we can do substitutions, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to tell the big guys, play your heart out, give me everything for 60 minutes. And then I'll take you off and I'll bring some new guys on. And they've only got 20 minutes to play, so they can give me 110%. He calls it the bomb squad, and it works. What does that look like for you at the office? What does that look like for you? Taking time for thinking during office hours, taking time for recovery during office hours, taking time for learning during office hours, taking time to be healthy during office hours. You hear what I'm saying about office hours? Relaxation, learning, reflection, recovery should not just be for your own account on the weekends and the weekends. It should be part of what we are all doing to get peak performance in the work that we do. And you're going to need a little bit of excess capacity in the system to get that, but you won't regret it when you see the productivity and the results and the innovation and adaptability and resilience and responsiveness to change and anti-fragility, etc. So final piece of the puzzle, the 7th thing I want to leave with you today is that relationships matter. We need to stay connected and build relationships. In a hybrid and virtual world that we've inhabited for the last 2 years, a lot of us have defaulted to transactional engagements. Most of our meetings that we schedule are all business focused, to-do list focused, and we've lost connection. If you do go back to the office, you don't have to go back to the office to have an update meeting where you all sit in a room and the boss speaks to you. That's a Teams meeting. Do that online. In fact, even better, the boss should record that as a video and send it to you and you watch it in your own time. If we are all going back to the office, we need to deliberately create moments where we connect, build relationships, get to know each other again. That for me is probably the most compelling reason to go back to the office. I'll do all of my work at home, thank you very much, but I'd like to be connected to my colleagues. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but my time is up, and I know Stuart wants to get on with the rest of the meeting. So this is a start. It's not a checklist. It's not a comprehensive list. It's a start on how you become anti-fragile. Now, I'm interested in where you plan to start. Won't you go here to this website, please? Grab your phone quickly, point the phone camera at the QR code. It will open up this page for you. I hope everything's working. At the moment, we didn't have a chance to test it, so hopefully it takes you to the right place. And here I've put some of the things that I've been talking about, like what I've just said, connection-only meetings, or asking better questions, or experimenting more. Which of these connects with you? Which of these resonates as something you would like to do? I've given you 8 or 9 options there. You can pick as many as you like. Maybe you're going to try all of them. Don't break anything, right? Don't try everything by Friday. Ease into these things. But please let us know what you plan to do. This is all anonymous, so you're not committing to anything. I'm not going to chase up with you later, but I'm just interested to see what your feedback is to what I believe are 7 really important things that you can do to become more anti-fragile. In case you didn't get that again last time, if the QR code doesn't work, just go to ahaslides.com/Altron or ahaslides.com, and if it asks you for a code, the code is Altron, and get in there and give me an answer. One final question from me then to you. Anti-fragile. What a concept, right? Anti-fragile says, bring it on. I want disruption, because disruption is the thing that will help me to grow. I think that's actually true. The start of all learning is recognizing you don't know everything. The start of all growth is recognizing you're not where you want to be. And antifragility reminds us that disorder, disruption, even sometimes a hit, that causes improvement and growth and development in our system, whether our system is ourselves, our family, our team, Altron, or maybe the country as a whole. If it does help us to improve, well then it was worth it. Gave you a lot of examples at the beginning of this presentation of anti-fragile systems. I think South Africa is an anti-fragile system. It often feels in South Africa that we're on the edge of a precipice, that we've taken a body blow and maybe one body blow too many. And then we rise. And we pick ourselves off the floor and we dust ourselves off. And what we need to be doing now, in the rest of 2022 and into 2023, is doing something different. Doing things we've never done before. And I think that these 7 things can help us as South Africans to face the rest of this year with a positive attitude, an outlook, and an attitude that says, what can I do in the system? I think if you think about this, it will help you in every aspect of your life. I wish you all the best of success in that. If you'd like to connect with me, if you've got some questions that you'd like to ask me, we don't have time now for Q&A, but you are more than welcome to connect with me. Follow me on my social channels, especially YouTube and LinkedIn. This is what I do all day, every day, and I love helping people like you to become anti-fragile. Prepare yourself for whatever might happen in the future and make the most of this fantastic but disrupted world that we live in. Thank you. And back to Stuart and the team.